Hello, hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today, we are going to talk about plot twists. Every reader tells you that they want plot twists. Give me twists, give me turns, surprise me, they say. This is what they want. Or is it? It's what they say they want, but that's just it. There's something of a, hey, let's call it a plot twist, to the art of creating plot twists, and most people don't entirely understand what it is. That's what we're going to talk about today in this episode. What a plot twist really is, understanding the psychology of it, what a reader wants versus what they say they want, and how to master the art of creating plot twists in your fiction. So, stay tuned. Do you yearn to make your living from writing fiction? Do you struggle to finish your manuscript due to block, indecision, or lack of confidence in your story? Have you already published books that just aren't getting the sales you'd like? The truth is, the thing that really makes a difference in book sales is not currently being taught in the fiction author space. And it comes from the story level, not the marketing level. Real talk, if you don't get it right at the story level, no amount of awesome marketing is going to make your book a bestseller. Hi, I'm Liesl. I've got 20 fiction books, 4 genres, the USA Today bestseller accolade, and multiple award wins under my belt. So, obviously I've been around the block a few times. I have a lot of readers that follow me from genre to genre, even though conventional wisdom says that's rare. Why? Because my readers know that I know how to tell a story that's going to make them feel something. And if you can master that skill, you can write anything you want for the rest of your life and know it will be well received by readers, which means better reviews, more gushing, more mega fans, and best of all, more royalties for you. Grab your fuzzy slippers and your chocolate of choice. I'm going to teach you how to emotionally engineer your story into the hearts and minds of your readers on purpose. Let's go. All right, before we get started, I have some exciting news that I just found out the other day. The Fiction Author Business School podcast is in the top 2.5% of podcasts for our category. I totally did not know that. I was looking at listen notes the other day and I found that out. So that's really exciting. I really had no idea. And so I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for listening every week and for coming to give me some of your valuable time and geek out with me about all things fiction writing. It's really means a lot to me that you guys come and you listen to me drone on. And I can even tell you from, this is a funny thing to say, but I can tell you from experience that I understand that my own voice can be annoying. And the reason that I say that, I'm really not being self-deprecating. I have been working on something this last week for the Legendary Fiction Forge. It was a challenge that we're doing for growing TikTok and Instagram. And it was one of those things where it just took way longer than I thought it would. I was hoping to get it done in about half a day, in like 3 or 4 hours. Yeah, it took 2 full days, like probably more than 16 hours to do. And it was because I was not paying attention to things and my sound was off when I made a bunch of the videos. And so I had to redo them. And let's just say that after 2 straight days of recording something and then having to play it back so I could edit it, I got so sick of the sound of my own voice. And of course, that doesn't happen all the time. And I know that you guys generally only listen to me once a week unless you're binging or something. But all that is to say that it just gave me a greater appreciation for my podcast listeners because you guys choose to tune in and listen to my voice every single week. So anyway, thank you very much for doing that, and I really, really appreciate you. And in order to celebrate the fact that I am in the top 2.5% of podcasts for my category, I've got something special for you at the end of the episode. So you gotta listen until the end to hear what it is, but it's just like a little thing that's kind of a celebration because I learned about this a few days ago. All right, so with all of that said, let's get into it. We are going to talk about the psychology of the plot twist, and why it works so well if you set it up right, and how to master creating plot twists in your fiction, okay? So, I did do an episode on how to put plot twists together last year. It's episode 178, if you want to go back and give it a listen. In that episode, I talked about kind of the logistics of a plot twist, like what you need to put it together and the different parts of it and such. We're going to go over that a little bit today, but in general, we're going in a slightly different direction, okay? We're going to talk more about the psychology of it and how to master this, but I am going to give you some tangible steps that you can take in order to help you plan plot twists for your fiction, all right? So let's dive in. You, if you've been listening to me for very long, have heard me gripe pretty endlessly, especially lately over the last few months, about how every part of your story needs to produce emotion, right? Remember that readers only read stories so that they can feel big emotions in a safe space. So basically everything in your story, every aspect of your story needs to evoke emotion from the reader in some way. But how do we do that? Well, let me put it another way. If you can learn to do this with every single part of your story, and when I say part of your story, I don't mean like the beginning, the middle, and the end. I mean, you have to do it with your plot, of course, with your characters, with your sentences, with your word choice, with your world building, with your theme. You know what I mean? Every single part, every aspect of writing a story, you need to be able to use that to evoke emotion from the reader in some way. And if you do that, you will be a master storyteller. A master storyteller is one that not just tells a story, but communicates a story in a way that allows the people who are absorbing it, whether they are listening to it or reading it or watching it, to feel the emotion of that story. It allows them to experience the story in a way that helps them to feel the emotion of the story. So again, how do we do that? How do we become master storytellers? How do we learn how to evoke emotion like that? Well, one answer that, as I've come to understand it, is by learning to communicate your story on the page in a way that evokes emotion. Because, look, guys, I totally understand that your story makes sense and is very emotional inside your own head. Okay, that's true of all of us. And that's the art part. But the craft part is learning to communicate that story on the page and to, at the same time, draw forth emotions, okay? And that becomes a skill, for sure. Now, the best way to figure out how to communicate emotion is, first of all, you have to understand what creates emotions in human beings, right? If you don't know what creates emotions for the average human being, then you're not going to be able to harness that in your story to help them feel the emotion. So you really do need to have an understanding of human psychology, of story psychology, and of different things that help human beings feel emotion. And that is what I teach inside the Forge. And that's kind of the lens through which we are going to approach plot twists today. So, as I said, the only reason that readers read books is to feel a big emotion in a safe space. And maybe you're totally on board with that. You're like, yeah, no, I get it. I believe you. I'm on board. I want to be able to guide my readers toward feeling these emotions, but how do I do that? Well, another term that I want you to familiarize yourself with is reader satisfaction. Obviously, we want to create reader satisfaction with our stories. And of course, you know, there are different levels of reader satisfaction. In fact, if we're looking at it as a continuum, then even a reader who hates the book, they could still be on that scale somewhere. They're just like in the negative side of things, you know, negative reader satisfaction. But the point is, you know, you could have someone read a book and go, yeah, that was pretty good. I liked that. And that means that they were satisfied with it, okay? And let me just say that there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes there are books out there that are very lighthearted. They are brain candy books. That's kind of what me and my friends call them, my author friends. But, you know, I say that and I don't at all mean it to be derogatory. We all need those sometimes. In fact, I needed one just a couple of weeks ago. I read a book that I actually thought was a crime fiction, and it turned out it was a true crime book. And that's fine. I enjoy true crime. I don't read as much true crime as I watch, but it was a very dark book. It was about a very, very dark case that had to do with a lot of abuse. And I do have some deal breakers to where I won't finish things, you know, the story or the episode or whatever it is in true crime if certain things are true of the case. And none of them were true in this particular book, in this particular case. So I did finish it, but it was just really heavy and really, really dark. So I actually literally went to my author friends and said, okay, give me something that is lighthearted, that is like a comedy or a romance. I just need a palate cleanser because that book was so heavy. And so they did. They told me something that actually had something come up on Libby that a couple of them had read. And so I read that and it was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. And, you know, so brain candy books or the lighthearted books, they're great. And there are plenty of authors who write those kinds of books who actually make a lot of money. So they're very successful. However, I'm just telling you all of this to preface what I'm going to say next, and that is that the reader satisfaction that I personally go for when I am writing my books is much, much deeper than that. Like I said, I have nothing wrong with brain candy books, and you can take my courses and learn how to write those too. Obviously, anything that I teach can apply to any genre and any type of book. But for me, I tend to go for the really deep, cathartic reader satisfaction that means that the story and the characters stay with the reader for a really long time, okay? It makes them want to reread the book or series. It makes them want to gush about it because they felt something, some emotion so deeply that it almost changed them on a subconscious level, okay? That's the kind of book I aim to write because those are the kind of books that I love and that I remember the most in terms of what I read growing up, and even since I became an adult. So I've probably read at this point hundreds of books in my life that I don't remember the details of, but those are not the kinds of books I want to write. Now, what does all of this have to do with plot twists? Well, it has to do with reader satisfaction. The main way to create reader satisfaction is, as I've already said, by helping them to feel emotion. So once again, how do we create emotion with plot twists specifically? Well, okay. The sequence is going to be different for every part of your story. There's not like one universal way to create emotion and use that same thing for emotion in characters and emotion in world building. No. It's going to be different each time. So you have to figure out the sequence of how to create emotion with each individual part. But one way among many to create emotion is through repetition and pattern recognition. I know. Have you ever heard someone talk about science and math and psychology in conjunction with how to write a great novel? Probably not. But buckle up, Buttercup, because get to know me. This is what I do, okay? It's what I specialize in. I'm going to give you the why real quick, and I promise I won't get too much in the weeds of it, but the short explanation is that our brains, as human beings, we automatically look for patterns, okay? And when we start to recognize patterns, and especially if we see them, more than once, if we see them, say we see the same pattern over and over again, it becomes familiar to us, okay? And that gives us a sense of safety because we've seen it before. It can also give us a sense of, let me backtrack a little bit. It gives us a sense of safety because we've seen it before and we recognize it, right? Then the next thing that our brain does is it tries automatically to discern some sort of meaning in the pattern. So the first step is to recognize the pattern. Hey, I've seen this before. This is being repeated. And then the next thing we do is, why is it being repeated? Is it that someone is repeating it on purpose? Is there some meaning I'm supposed to take out of this? The why, the what does it all mean? I mean, that's such a human question to ask, right? And our brains will ask it whether we want them to or not. So that is why repetition can create emotion. And if we can find some sort of meaning in that repetition, then it actually creates euphoria in our brain, okay? And this is what people do when they read books. This is why, you guys have heard me gripe a lot about setups and payoffs and how the more information you give your reader up front, the more invested in the story they will be and the more that they will read it. So that's why it's not a good idea to just withhold information all the way until the end when you suddenly have the plot twist because you haven't gotten the reader emotionally invested in it, okay? But I'm going to go into that more in just a minute when we talk about, specifically the psychology of the plot twist. But again, just remember that repetition and pattern recognition always are going to help you create emotion in your book. So here's the next thing you need to know, and I promise we'll get to the actual plot twist part. We need to talk a little bit about reader behavior. I said in the intro that there's kind of a dissonance between what the reader tells you they want and what they actually want. And this is actually true of all human beings, not just readers, but readers are no exception, okay? Very often, people will tell you what they think they want, and they're not lying. That really is what they think they want. But you have to pay attention to their behavior because people are not always experts in what they actually want. This is very true in the business sector, I would know, but it's true of reader behavior too. So let me give you some examples so you can kind of wrap your head around what I'm saying. If you are a parent, you've probably had this experience before, and even if you're not, you've probably seen it in someone else's kids before. How often does a child open a toy, on Christmas morning, and it's something that the parent is excited to give them and paid a lot of money for, and then they open it and the kid seems super excited and is jumping up and down, and then the parent opens the box and puts the toy together, and what does the kid do? They play with the box for 3 hours, right? And the parent is rolling their eyes going, okay, well, clearly I should have just bought them a box, because they're just as excited about that as they are about this toy that I paid all this money for, right? That's what I mean. You have to pay attention to their behavior, to what they actually do, okay? Because very often what they say they want is not what they actually want, and their behavior, not their words, will dictate what they actually want. Another example of this is a famous quote by Henry Ford, who invented the modern automobile engine. And he famously said that if he had asked people what they wanted and based his inventions on that, they would have told him that they wanted faster horses, right? And remember that, or I don't know, maybe not remember, I don't know if you know this, but the very first automobile in a car, they raced it against a horse that was pulling a carriage, and the horse won. So the first automobile kind of sucked, it was just, but that's true of all technology. The first cell phone we had was not what we have today, that's just typical. But the point is, people would not have asked for that because they wouldn't have realized that it's what they wanted. They wouldn't have realized that it was the answer to what they're actually looking for. They would have just gone with what they think they want, right? So what does this have to do with readers? Well, let me give you an example of how I saw this play out kind of in real time when it came to a famous book. And I do think I've told this story before. I think I've told it in conjunction with setups and payoffs and not going off the rails with your story to make sure that you set it up clearly enough that the reader has some idea where it's going. It's about Game of Thrones. So I read the Game of Thrones book, all of the books that were out at the time, in between the first and second seasons of the HBO series. So I actually watched the first season, and I had not read the books, but I liked it so much that I knew it was going to be a year or more before the second season came out, and so I read all of the books in between. And while I was doing that, at one point, I got online and was looking at threads and, readers discussing the books on Goodreads. Now, there is a particular storyline in which you have a young man named Bran, and he basically leaves his home with a group of companions, and they head north. And I won't go into the details, it doesn't really matter. You'll know what I mean if you've either read the books or seen the films. But he's headed north, and he keeps going north for a long time. And it always seems along the way that the author is setting up places for him to go. And this is exactly what I saw people talking about online. They would be like, oh, okay, so, he's going to go here. That's what's going to happen. And then he wouldn't go there. I mean, he would sort of bypass it, so he could have gone there. But in the story, he didn't stop. He kept going. And then, he's going to go to the wall and reunite with Jon. That's what's going to happen. And he went to the wall, but he didn't see Jon. He just kept going. And I was literally reading these threads of these readers online who got so frustrated with the storyline. They were going, where is he going with this? Where is he taking Bran? We don't understand. And I mean, I don't know that very many of them didn't continue reading. I'm sure they did, but that was almost where they were. They were so frustrated that they wanted to throw that particular storyline against the wall, and that is a really good example of how the author didn't set it up well enough to where people had some idea where it was going, right? They were frustrated because they couldn't comprehend where he might be taking that storyline. Now, of course, this is George R.R. Martin. He is today one of the most successful authors in the world, so I'm not going to say that he did it wrong or anything, but if he didn't want his readers to have that particular reaction, he kind of needed to drop some more hints, some more breadcrumbs to where he was going with it. Okay, so the important thing about that I want you to take away is that it's not even necessarily important that the reader knows where the story is going. It's important that they think they know where it's going, that they have some inkling of where it might go, okay? Because that is what that empowered and kind of euphoric sense, because it is a form of pattern recognition. Even if they don't know exactly where it's going, they're going to guess. Their brain can't help it when they're reading or absorbing a story. Their brain is going to try to guess where it's going. So it's not important that they actually know where it's going, but it's important that they think they do. Okay, so think logically about how readers read books. We read them and categorize them by genre, by tropes, by situations, right? They want things that are familiar. So how does that jive with them saying they want plot twists? Because a plot twist, by definition, is a surprise, right? The answer is they want twists and turns within the boundaries of what's familiar. So you've heard me preach about this before, right? To say that, they want to be completely surprised isn't true, because if they wanted to be completely surprised, they wouldn't always read within their chosen genre, right? Their chosen genre is, obviously it's a taste thing, it's what they prefer, but it's very familiar to them as well because they love it, because they prefer it, right? So they want twists and turns within the boundaries of that genre, within the boundaries of a typical story structure, because that's familiar, okay? And this, incidentally, this is a little off topic, but this is why cross-genre is hard to sell, because people like the genre that they are familiar with. And you could have an amazing story, but if you can't convey that it has the things in it that are familiar to them and that they enjoy reading about, you're going to have a real hard time getting them to buy that book. So cross-genre is hard to sell, or at least at first. Eventually it might become its own genre, and then maybe it won't be as hard to sell. But you get the idea. So going back to people saying they want one thing, but doing another. Do people actually want plot twists? Yes-ish. I personally think on a psychological level that the plot twist itself isn't the important thing. I mean, what actually happens, or do they actually care if you tell the story one way and not another? I don't think so. I think that the plot twist itself isn't as important as the emotion that they feel because of it, okay? Always bring everything back to that. Do they want plot twists? Sure, but what they really want, what they're really saying, is that they want to be surprised. They want to feel an unexpected emotion, because when that happens and they're shocked, it gives them adrenaline, right? And they go, whoa, I did not see that coming. And that's actually kind of a pleasant feeling. That's what they're after. You see what I mean? So maybe it's splitting hairs because plot twists just so happen to be great, effective, and proprietary way to do this in fiction, but you always have to bring everything back to emotion and what they're really after, okay? Because readers can't articulate this. This is what I mean about people saying one thing and actually wanting another. They will say, no, I want to be surprised. I want there to be plot twists. But if you made everything so surprising and so plot twisty that they did not at all see it coming, and you did not adhere to genre, and you did not adhere to tropes, I'm telling you, everyone is going to hate your book. And then you're gonna sit there, with your hands up going, I don't understand. You said you wanted plot twists. So you see what I mean? They are saying one thing, but you have to understand what they're actually asking for when they say that. Okay, so with that understood, let's talk about how to actually set up a plot twist. You might want to grab a pen and write these down if you are in a place you can do that. Please don't be doing that if you're driving or something. Number one, you have to decide on the true outcome. So what I mean is that you're going to set up a twist, and you have to know what's actually going to happen. So this is important for you to understand too. It is almost impossible to create really effective plot twists unless you do some planning, okay? Unless you know the true outcome you're heading toward, and possibly also the theme you're writing to, okay? So obviously there's different kinds of plot twists. Let's go over that real fast. We could be talking about the big like the big cheese, the big kahuna ending, and that's going to be a big plot twist, okay? But you can also do smaller plot twists within scenes, within certain aspects of your novel, okay? So when I say true outcome, that could be the real ending, but if you're doing a smaller plot twist, it could also be, within a scene or something. And maybe the easiest way to talk about this, the most obvious way, has to do with mysteries. Most mysteries put in what are called red herrings in the genre, and that just means, we know that the actual murderer was Professor Plum in the library with the candlestick. We know that that is the actual outcome that we're going to have at the end of the book, right? So that's the first thing we need to know, is how it actually turns out. Okay, that's number one. Number two is that we have to come up with an alternate outcome that is actually not going to be true. So maybe the alternate outcome is that we're going to try to make them believe it is Colonel Mustard in the drawing room with, the revolver or whatever. So you have to come up with the true outcome and then the alternate one that actually isn't true, right? Okay, so that's step one and step two. Step three is that you have to drop clues in the story toward both. Here's where it gets a little bit complicated and where you're going to have to do some planning, okay? Because you have to make them familiar with both. Obviously, if you want them to believe the alternate outcome, the untrue one, you are going to have to take pains to make them believe that that's what's happening. But at the same time, when you do the plot twist, it can't be totally foreign to them. It has to be familiar. Okay, otherwise it's going to feel like Deus Ex Machina, which I will get into in just a minute. It's going to feel too convenient, like it came out of the left field, right? And you need to make them familiar with both possibilities for the ending. Okay, so you're simultaneously trying to mislead them with the alternate outcome, but you're also planting seeds toward the true outcome so that when everything is revealed, they are shocked because they didn't see the true outcome coming, right? But also, the true outcome feels like fate or destiny because you set it up well enough. And this is where, it really becomes a skill, because there's a lot of different ways you can do this, and you can weight it basically however you want. And what I mean by that is there are some, books I've read or movies I've seen where they equally weight the two so that literally you're consciously aware of both outcomes, and you're going, okay, again, you could see this in a mystery. Okay, is it guy A or is it guy B? I know it's one of them, and they're going to keep us guessing until the end, but I know it's one of the two, right? But a true plot twist is when you're so subtle with the true ending that they really don't think that's what's happening. They're more convinced of the alternate or untrue outcome, so then it becomes a twist when it turns out that it's the first one. And in terms of telling you how to do this well, again, it's something you just have to try to do. You're going to need to get feedback on, have people read it and see. But what I would say is that you want to be very light in peppering in the clues about the truth. So definitely put them in there so that they're aware, because they really should have a light bulb moment when the plot twists happen and go, oh, that's why in this scene, da-da-da-da-da, and then it just makes sense to them why that was the outcome. But it has to remain subtle so that they're not guessing it, right? Whereas you need to be very, very heavy-handed in pushing the alternate or untrue outcome so that they believe that, okay? And like I said, there's not an exact science toward this. It's just something that you have to play with and try to get better at, and the best way to do that is to get feedback from other people reading your story. All right, so let's talk about Deus Ex Machina real fast, in case anybody is unfamiliar with that. I'm assuming most of you are probably familiar just because you're writers, but in case you aren't, Deus Ex Machina just means that the ending is contrived, and specifically that basically God or some higher power intervenes to save everybody. Okay, so it comes from the Greek, where we would actually see in Greek plays, all hope was lost and the hero was about to die and the catastrophe was about to happen, and then Zeus would swoop down and say, oh, well, I saw this was happening and it's not cool, so I'm going to fix it and intervene here, But the problem with that is that it's literally the worst ending you could ever come up with, because the characters do not grow, they do not change, they do not overcome. We like to see characters who struggle and toil and then overcome something so that they become a higher version of themselves at the end of the story, right? That's what readers want to see. Another thing they can't always articulate, but that is what they want, okay? So just having something conveniently come in and save them, it's cheap and it's contrived and we don't like it and it's too convenient, and yeah, just worst thing you could possibly do. So don't do that. So let me give you a couple of examples of really great plot twists and how I've seen them play out. And before we get to that, let me say that there are two major ways to do this. Another thing you might want to write down. Method one is to say something is going to happen and then not have it happen. So that would be the plot twist. And I'm going to give you examples of this in just a minute. And the second way is to say something is going to happen and then have it happen. Now that might not sound like a plot twist, but in this case, it's because it's something that the protagonist is trying to prevent. So it's you saying there's going to be this big catastrophe and the protagonist is going, no, it's not going to happen. We're going to figure it out. We're going to prevent it. We're going to stop it. And then they don't. And, because the protagonist is saying that, the audience is going to assume that they will stop it, but then they don't. So that's the plot twist. So let's get some examples going here. Let's do the second one first, in which you say something is going to happen and then it does happen because they don't prevent it. There was a series a long time ago, and I had to look up how old this series was. I was thinking it was like 10 years old. Actually, it's 18 years old, so it's older than I thought it was, and I'm kind of dating myself, but it was called Heroes. Hayden Panettiere was in it, and she was really young in it. So this was kind of a pop culture phenomenon when it started. I remember watching it, and I remember people could not get enough of it. It was so fantastic. And that was the first season. After that, it kind of tanked. They had a hard time keeping up that same level of momentum and keeping it compelling after that first season. And I'm even going to be able to tell you why here in just a minute. But at the time, it was just everybody was watching it that I knew. And basically, the premise was, there was quite a few characters in it, but there was a big catastrophe coming. And there was one man in particular who was a painter. And every time he would start painting, he would go into a trance and he would have visions of the future. And so he was seeing this big catastrophe happening. And I honestly don't even remember exactly what the catastrophe was, but it was like extinction level event. It was like nuclear winter. It was like this huge catastrophe, you know. And he saw a whole bunch of people that were involved, and some of them it looked like they were going to die, and some of them I think were able to maybe prevent it, and he didn't know who any of them were in real life. In the show, there were other characters in the show, but he would have these visions, and pretty much the whole first season was them trying to prevent this catastrophe from happening. So this is yet another example of why you should set things up. Okay, they literally told us what was going to happen. They showed it to us through his visions if they didn't prevent this. Okay, so they were setting this up like, we're not just going to have some big twist at the end. We're telling you this is exactly what is going to happen, blow by blow, if they don't figure it out. Spoiler, at the end of the season, they did not figure it out. They did not prevent it. There were some things that I remember, it kind of seemed like this character or that character might die, but it wasn't even so much that it was prevented as, you know, in the vision, they just didn't have it all. And so it looked like they were going to die, but then they actually didn't. But the point is, it was the big plot twist because everyone assumed they would find some way to avert the disaster, and they did not. Okay. And like I said, people could not get enough of that story in the first season because they had told us what was going to happen, and we had to tune in to see if it was actually going to happen, right? And I did say I would tell you why it didn't keep that same momentum, because they had a hard time reproducing that in later seasons. They didn't use the same structure, I guess. Like, they really should have kept going with the visions and kept going with, that's what was working. That's what people loved and why they kept tuning in. And then after the first season, they completely scrapped that aspect of it and weren't doing that anymore. And it just didn't have the same pull, it wasn't as compelling. So this is the problem, and I see this all the time with TV shows. They try to replicate the wrong things. So you have something that was working really well in one season, and then the second season, they do something completely different. And then they're shocked that it doesn't work and people stop watching. Well, it's because the thing they were watching for, you're not doing that anymore. Okay. But, not everyone realizes that. Okay. So that would be an example of having, you say something is going to happen, but then you actually do have it happen, and that's the plot twist. The other way that I talked about is to say something is going to happen and then not have it happen. Now, one really interesting scene that I have thought about a lot since I started analyzing story is from Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. It's the scene very near the end where everybody's getting ready to jump in their little spaceships and go try to blow up the Death Star, and Luke and Han have a conversation. Now, the reason that I have thought about this particular scene a lot is because when I started learning about story years and years ago, I wondered, is this not an example of Deus Ex Machina? Because really, at the very end, just when it looks like Darth Vader is about to blow up Luke, Han swoops in and saves the day. And I wondered that, when I was first learning this and not as well versed in it as I am now, I would go, wait a minute, isn't that kind of Deus Ex Machina? But I didn't want it to be because I actually love that part. Most people do. That's a great plot twist, to have him come in and save Luke like that. But it kind of seemed like it was. Now, I want you to think about it for just a minute. Would you call that Deus Ex Machina or not? And try to think about why. Have your answer? So I'm going to tell you that it's not Deus Ex Machina. Thank you very much. We can actually love that plot twist and not feel guilty about it. But here's why. Because they set it up, quite simply. All right? Deus Ex Machina is very easy to avoid, okay? If you literally want to have Zeus come out of the sky and save people, you can do that and have it not be Deus Ex Machina. You just have to set it up first. You just have to make it logical in the reader's mind. And all you have to do is set it up. So if, here's a little hack for you. If you have somebody reading your book and they come to a particular part and they say, oh, this felt too convenient. I didn't understand. This came out of left field. It didn't feel authentic to me. Don't be discouraged by that. Be glad that they told you that so that you can fix it. All you got to do is go back to earlier in the book and set it up and say, oh, this might happen at some point in the future, and then boom, no more Deus Ex Machina. That's all you have to do to avoid it, is set the thing up, okay? That's why setups are so important. So with this particular scene with Han and Luke, you'll remember that Han was getting ready to leave. He got his reward. He was literally loading it into the spaceship, and he's gonna go. He's done his part, and he's out of there. And Luke is trying to convince him to stay and do the right thing and help them, and he doesn't want to. Now, let's look at how they set up this plot twist. They did their very best to convince the audience that Han was leaving and he was going to be a selfish person and, you know, look after himself, and that was just going to be that. Now, how did they do this? Number one, honestly, they set it up using his character. By this point in the movie, we know and understand Han pretty well, okay? And he's very much put himself forward as just the smuggler who only looks out for his own interests. And yes, I mean, of course, you can make the argument of smuggler with a heart of gold, but he puts that forward to people as that is who he is. And at this part, he doesn't even consider it. He gives Luke a pretty hard no, you know, that's not happening. And more than that, we're seeing him loading stuff into his spaceship like he is leaving. This is not something he's considering doing. Maybe he'll do. He is doing it, right? So that is the alternate outcome. And they convince us pretty well that that's what's going to happen, right? And then, of course, after that, there's a lot of distraction because, you know, Luke hops in his little spaceship and goes up to try and blow up the pockmarked metal ball in the sky. And, you know, there's a lot going on. There's spaceships and there's explosions and there's people and they're all talking on their comm system. And we don't really think about Han again, right? So he's completely left our minds. The only way in which they plant the seed for what he will actually do. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that, you know, the whole smuggler with a heart of gold, even though he puts on the tough guy exterior, we know that he's a good guy underneath, but can we really count on that? Can we count on that making him do the right thing? We're not really sure because they've taken the pain to convince us that he won't in this scene, right? The only part in this scene that, you know, maybe gives an inkling about what might happen, the true thing that might happen, is when, after Luke walks away, he says something to Chewie. I can't remember what it is. He says, "Stop looking at me like that," or something like that. And then he says, "I know what I'm doing." So it's almost like he's got just a little tiny inkling of a doubt, like the fact that he's feeling the need to justify himself to Chewie. But at the end of the day, he's still stubbornly determined to do what he had planned to do, right? So in this case, they said that something was going to happen, which was that Han was leaving and was not going to help, and then that did not happen. But you see that when he swooped in to save Luke, it made perfect sense. You know, it might have even been okay if they had not put this scene in. I don't know that anyone... Well, it would just depend on how they did it, I guess. and now we're getting into, you know, it doesn't really matter because this is the way they did it. But if we had not seen anything of Han after they reached the rebel base and then he showed up, that would have been too convenient. People would have gone, wait a minute, where's he been this whole time? How did he just now get here? You know, so that would have been a little bit Deus Ex Machina. I mean, people probably still would have accepted that he was around somewhere, but we would have kind of needed to know where he came from anyway. But by putting in the scene, think about everything the scene does for your reader, okay? Or in this case, your audience who's watching. It creates the plot twist, obviously, that he shows up. But in a fraction of an instant, think about what that does as well in terms of putting forth Han's character. Because in that instant, when Han shows up, what does the audience conclude? That he changed his mind, that he came back and he's actually a good guy, that he's actually loyal to Luke, who asked him to stay, and everyone goes, oh, he stayed, you know? And then, of course, he saved Luke's butt and kind of tiddlywinked Vader out into space, which was super cool and badass. And you just got to understand that evokes so much emotion in your audience, okay? Not only because of the plot twist that they didn't see coming, but because of what it says about your character, right? So nobody thought that was Deus Ex Machina, and, you know, most people are not watching a sci-fi going, is this particular event Deus Ex Machina? No, they wouldn't have thought that anyway, but in the moment, they not only accepted it, they jumped up and cheered, right? So that is a plot twist done very, very well. So when you're crafting your story, I know I'm running a little long here this week. I guess I can get a little passionate about psychology and plot twists. But when you're crafting your story, this is just something that you should always think about, okay? How can I give people an idea of where this is going, and how can I make them think it's going one way when really it's going another? And the answer is always just to plant seeds, okay? How do you plant seeds? Have the characters think or talk about it going some particular way. Show scenes, like this one with Han and Luke, that make the reader think it's definitely going that way. You know, we see Han leaving, and it's the perfect misdirection right there. I actually did this, and just to give you an idea of outcome when it comes to readers, I did this in my first Dragon Magic book, which came out at the beginning of the year. And I was thinking about it when I was putting together this podcast, and I went, whoa, I actually did both of those things. I did both ways, okay? I have a storyline where a young woman has to go be coronated as queen. This is a dragon fantasy, and she has to, it's kind of a whole magical contract thing. So the idea is that the magic is failing. The magic holds up the boundary around that protects their land. And if she doesn't get there within 7 days to be coronated and married to her new husband, which is an arranged marriage, then the magic is going to fail and the boundary is going to fall. And that's a huge catastrophe because they don't know what's outside the boundary. It has protected them for thousands of years. So the way in which I did this is I made sure that everyone believed that she was going to make it there and she was going to be coronated. Like, she says it, everyone around her says it, it's going to be a catastrophe if you don't. Now, naturally, there's other things going on in the story. She gets to the point where she doesn't want to do the coronation anymore because, number one, her life is in jeopardy. She finds out there's political stuff going on and she could be killed later on. And she also kind of, as often happens in books, starts to fall in love with somebody who is not the guy she's going to marry. But even saying that, like, that's the reason she doesn't want to go through with the coronation and the marriage, I still actually have them have conversations about why she's going to do her duty. They need to protect the people, and then they'll figure out how to protect her after the coronation, on and on and on. So I really, really push people toward this is happening. And the reason that it was compelling is because she was going to be marrying someone she didn't love, right? And so people think that's what's happening. I very much set it up in a way as, okay, this is what's going to happen at the end. She's going to go through with the coronation and the wedding, and it is somebody that she is not in love with, and her life is going to be in danger, but they're going to figure that out later, and it's a series, so they're thinking, okay, that's what book 2 will be about. And then, a little bit of a spoiler, at the end, she does not end up going through with it. So it was something where I said something was going to happen and it didn't. On the flip side, I did talk about how she needed to go through with it because otherwise the boundary would fall and there would be some sort of catastrophe. Well, guess what? That is an example of the second way to do it, because I said something was going to happen unless they prevented it by having her get coronated. And then it actually did happen at the end. The boundary does fall. There is a huge catastrophe, right? And the reason I'm telling you this is because I literally have several, I don't even know how many reviews on that book where the reader says this. They say, oh, I totally should have seen that ending coming and I did not see it. Wow. You know what I mean? And that's what you will get if you can set up these plot twists in a really effective way. Okay, that's what you're going for. You want the reader to be surprised in a good way, and you want them to be gushing about it. But you need to understand that the only way to achieve that is to obviously set up an effective plot twist, and I've told you how to do that with these steps. But more than that, it's to create emotion, right? You have to create that emotion in them or you're not going to get that response. And again, the only way to create emotion is to understand the psychology of human beings and the psychology of story and what creates emotion in human beings. Plot twists can most definitely do it, and they usually do, but you have to set them up right, okay? So let's just do a quick recap about how to set up a plot twist. Number one, you've got to decide on the true outcome, which means you kind of need to know how it ends. This could be the whole ending of the story, depending on what plot twist we're talking about, or just the situation that you're doing the plot twist in. You need to understand how it's really going to play out. Second, you need to come up with the alternate outcome that you're going to be using as a misdirection that isn't actually going to be true. And then you're going to have to, number three, drop clues toward both. Okay, you have to make them familiar with both so that you are simultaneously misleading them and also planting seeds for the true outcome. You need to be heavy-handed with the untrue outcome, with the red herring, and just very, very light with the truth so that they do recognize it, but so that it's not jumping out at them as what's actually going to happen, okay? And that it is a balancing game. It's not an exact science, right? And then keep in mind that the two different types of plot twists you can do is to say something is going to happen and then not have it happen, which will be the twist, or to say something is going to happen if they don't prevent it, but then have it happen, okay? All right, so your homework for today or this week or whenever is just to think through the story that you're writing. Think about your biggest twists, your biggest reveals, and even your biggest gasp moments. Because guys, this doesn't always have to be plot related. Obviously, when we think of plot twists, I mean, it's called a plot twist. So we think of physical events in the plot, and those are great to use for twists. But you can also use things that aren't as much plot related. You can find out things that are like epiphanies about your character, histories about your character. One that jumps to mind, I still remember the first time I read A Tale of Two Cities in high school. And there's this one part where you find out that what is her name? Defarge, Madame Defarge. She's actually a really good example of a female villain. And she's very bloodthirsty. She's all about the guillotine. And you don't really, I don't know, at least I didn't. I was a teenager, I might have been a little over my head. But you don't really question why she's there other than, I mean, she's the villain. Of course she's there. She's just kind of evil and icky, But then you find out that her family was murdered and she has this whole blood tie to what's going on. And that was a gasp moment, for me reading it the first time. And that really didn't change the trajectory of the plot at all. It didn't change what was going on. It was just the author letting you know this is her motivation. So even things like that information can still be plot twists, okay? So anyway, just to say that you can use big plot events, but you can use other things that are not, external and physical plot events either. So just think about the biggest moments, your biggest twists, yes, your biggest plot events, your biggest reveals, your biggest epiphany moments, and try to figure out how to make them more emotional through twists. Either wait to reveal them, use misdirection, go through these steps that I've given you today and see if you can apply them to any big moment in your story to make it more emotional and give the reader that unexpected emotion that they're looking for when they say they want plot twists, okay? All right, guys, that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. Oh, I told you at the beginning that I had a little something for you before I forget, because just to kind of celebrate that I found out I'm in the top 2.5% of podcasts. I had a promo going on the Legendary Fiction Forge that I actually finished up with yesterday, but I'm going to honor it for anybody who wants it. So, we have the normal price, monthly price of the Legendary Fiction Forge, but the promo was that if you are interested in joining and getting the help that I provide in there, I will allow you to get the first month in the membership for $27. Okay, after that, it's just the first month. It's a promo for $27. And then after that, it will go back to the regular price after that. But again, guys, I have so much in there. Everything I've talked about today, the psychology, understanding how to evoke emotions step by step in each part of what you write to evoke these emotions. That's what I teach in the membership. Okay, and we have a lot of training in there right now. You get more every month. But for $27, you get 30 days, that's less than $1 a day. And you can look around and decide if this is for you. If it's not, I get it. It's not for everyone and you can be on your way. But if it is, then you can hang out. And we have a great group of authors in there, a great community. So I'm not even going to give you a URL because this is a promo that is hidden. It's not something you can just click on. So if that is something that you're interested in, like I said, I will honor it for a few more days. Just email me. I will put my email, the email that I want you to use in the show notes, and I will give you a code to get the first month for $27. And again, that's just in celebration because I found out I'm in the top 2.5% of podcasts, and I did a little dance when I found that out. So if anybody wants to take advantage of that promo, just send me an email and just say that, I would like to take advantage of the $27 promo, and I will tell you what to do next so that you can take advantage of that. All right. Everyone have a wonderful week of writing. Have a wonderful week thinking up and implementing your plot twists, and I will be back next week. Bye. Thanks for listening today. If this episode helped or inspired you in any way, would you do me a solid and leave me a review? Reviews help other fiction authors find the podcast. You could also recommend it to a writer friend of yours so they can get the same inspiration you got. Remember, you have a story inside you that only you can tell. So get out there and write your soul story, because your readers are waiting for it with bated breath.